You like that?
Okay.
All right. The voice you're hearing is David Jr. Who you're looking at is David Sr., my father. And we're going to talk a little bit about my father's military experience. But for now, we're doing some introduction stuff. So he's going to tell a little bit about where he was from, and how it was coming up. So, uh, Dad, you want to say your name, your age,
Yeah,
maybe the year you were born?
I'm David Wright, and I'm 79 years old this month, and I've been in Minnesota for the last since 19 early 70s. So I've been here for quite a while, and but I want you to know a little bit about myself and my military history, but also I want you to know about uh, the past before the military and how I came to be where I am today. But nevertheless, I'm here to do this interview with my son, my oldest son, David Jr., and I'll be waiting for him to give me the questions, and I'll answer them 100% to the best of my knowledge. And where we do want to start is from my childhood and as far back as I can remember. When I was growing up as a child, I can sure remember there was no electric lights.
So when were you born? What year?
1943.
Okay. Do
Yeah.
you do you recall where you were born?
No, I don't recall where I was born. Supposedly, I was born in a little town called Valley Mills, but I'm not really sure because my memory goes back to a sugarcane field. And I believe that the sugarcane field had something to do with plantation like um, doings. And so I think we were on some type of a plantation uh, for a minute. And I'm not sure if I was born in Valley Mills or not, but nevertheless, that's what my supposedly birth certificate says.
Okay. So let's talk about some of your earliest memories. You talk about sugarcane field.
Yeah,
Is that where you want to start?
yeah, that's good. Um, Now, a lot of people don't know too much about sugarcane. Um, I think they mainly have machinery to do the sugarcane nowadays, but back in the day, they had people to cut the sugarcane, individuals to cut sugarcane, and I can remember kind of running free in the sugarcane field, and all of a sudden, I could remember the stinging on my back.
How
You
old were
know,
you?
I couldn't have been any more than 4 or 5 years old.
So you're playing in sugarcane fields, and you getting cut up. You feel stinging.
Yeah, the stinging was I was being cut by the sugarcane leaves, and I didn't know this, but uh, the sugarcane does have very sharp leaves on it, and I suppose my sweating and being out in the sugarcane, running around, the leaves hitting me and cutting me, and I didn't really know it because that's how sharp the sugarcane leaves are. You don't really know that you're cut until the salty sweat hit the cuts, and it hurt. As a child, it burned, and I can remember my mother was still alive at this time, and she uh, poured water on my back and rubbed it in, and that took away the stinging sensation from the sugar cane. From the sugarcane fields, I believe we went to another plantation. I believe it was a plantation, and it was a place called Smith Bend, Texas. And I don't know if any of you ever heard of it before, but it's not too far from Valley Mills. Smith Bend was a plantation that grew watermelons, peanuts, peach trees, I'm not sure of all the things that this plantation grew and didn't grow, but they did grow a lot of different food. My grandfather was in charge of this, and we were all working, I guess, for my grandfather, under my grandfather. But nevertheless, this is a place that I remember very well because we were there for quite some time. And when you're on a plantation like we were on, it was totally out of the ordinary because the plantation that we were on, the dirt was red. When you got to this section of Texas, for whatever reason, you went from normal looking vegetation or regular colors like of the rocks and whatever have you. But this part of uh, Texas, the soil just became red. It was like you was in another world. Everything was red, and there we grew the watermelons and the peanuts, and obviously the red is some type of a good soil. So this is where we were on this plantation for quite a while. I don't know. Beb Smith was the name of the guy that, in case some of you want to look it up, was in charge of my grandfather, and my grandfather worked for him, and we worked for my grandfather, so we all worked for him.
And Bev Smith, he was the plantation owner.
He was a plantation owner. He owned the land, yes, yeah. But when we was working the fields, I remember my grandfather um, would cultivate the watermelons, and sometimes he would check them out. He would leave me alone with a watermelon. He would take his fist and bust open the watermelon and and leave me there with the watermelon. I ate as much as I wanted. Very good watermelons. I can remember, very delicious. And
How old were you?
I couldn't have been any more than 4,
Hmm.
maybe 5 at the most. And I can't remember. I can remember it during that time. There was no electricity. There was no bathroom. There was no source of showers or places to go to use the bathroom except the outhouse. I don't remember toilet paper. I don't remember toothpaste. I don't remember a toothbrush growing up. But nevertheless, here we was, and life was carrying us on, and we had to follow whatever life had to offer us. And I can remember back during a short period of time we were working the cotton fields also. So I'm not really sure how the two connected, but nevertheless, during this period of time, um, slavery was very close at hand, and I think that we had a lot to do with it. Uh, I can tell by the way that my grandfather had to operate. We had nothing. We made uh, everyday items like soap. We made that from the boiling of the lye, and you have to know what you're doing in order to use that. But we had lye soap. Yeah, we didn't go to the store and buy soap. We went to the outhouses. We didn't have toilet paper.
What'd you guys use?
Well, I believe we used newspaper, and at other times they probably just used stones. It may sound kind of primitive, but whatever was at hand, that's what you used to wipe your butts. And the showers and the bath was non-existent, not too much.
So how'd you guys bathe usually?
Well, bathing was not that often, and we had to go outside to a tub, a bathtub, and someone would come out and pour water over the top of you, and you would soap up and wash off, and that's the way we showered.
How frequently do Curious.
Well, I think that it was not very often, probably once every 2 weeks or so.
Hmm.
And I don't remember owning a toothbrush either. So man, we obviously hygiene was kind of handling itself. I'm not really sure about the rest of it. And what I'm thinking is that uh, every day when we got up, we obviously just rinsed our mouth, not brushed our teeth. So I'm not really sure how hygiene uh, played a part in our lives. It wasn't very good, I can say that.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about some of the family that you had around you when you were as early as you could remember. Who was around you? How old were you, and who was around you?
Well, the main people, for some reason, uh, the main people that was around me was my grandmother, my grandfather, my mother, and I suppose it must have been the man that she was with at the time. I guess they were living together. I'm not really sure, but it was the little bunch of us. I had other cousins, first cousins, but I was the only one that was kind of caught up in the South in that traffic of being uh, part of that uh, upbringing coming up.
In the South.
And I was from uh, Texas, but I had been to Illinois, where my other relatives were. My mother's sisters and a brother was from uh, Texas, but early on they moved to Illinois to start their families. So I was the only child. My mother was the only one that was uh, left in Texas, and so her and I was living with my grandparents at the time.
Do you want to describe how they, anything about them, like how they looked? What, like your grandfather, for instance, you said he was kind of in charge of you guys.
Yeah, he was super in charge. My grandfather was a veterinarian. Um, I guess self-taught. Obviously, no one taught him what he knew except he learned from someone. But he used to take care of the people uh, in the little town of Valley Mills, and he was very good at building. He was very good at hunting. I think a good part of our lives depended on him and his skills at hunting. Uh, the main hunting he would do was like raccoon hunting, squirrel hunting, rabbit hunting. We ate all of these foods growing up, and even birds, blackbirds. I can remember him shooting blackbirds in the field next to us. This was our source probably of protein off and on during the wintertime because and we did have a smokehouse. My grandfather knew how to smoke meat, so we did have food, and he did provide it all. We had at our home we had a peach orchard, we had a garden, we had an outhouse, um, and we had water. And my grandfather knew how to take care of business. He knew how to uh, make money and have an income coming in without him having to do all the back-breaking work, especially during the winter months when we weren't picking cotton or chopping cotton in the cotton fields. I suppose my grandfather had to find another source of income and the way of eating, and he did that. I mean, with the utmost knowledge. Where we lived at in Valley Mills, um, we had mostly everything that we wanted. We lived in a pretty good sized house. Uh,
Describe the house a little bit.
well, the house was like a pretty big house. It was, but I can only remember certain parts of it, I suppose, because certain parts of it maybe in those days was off limits. It was probably my grandparents' room. And so I can just remember one room that I mainly kind of was in, and I can remember a back room. Uh, in the back room is where my grandfather used to do his banking. And when I say do his banking, whatever money he made, it was this baby's carriage crib, and it was on wheels. It was pretty big. And whenever he made money, he would throw it behind the crib uh, to use for a rainy day, I suppose. But uh, that's where he would that's where he would put his savings at.
Um, do you want to talk about your grandmother?
Well, yeah, my grandmother's name was Nina Bell, and that kind of Nina Bell. I don't know too much. We didn't never talk too much about their upcomings because I imagine their upcomings was a little bit hectic, and they didn't want to introduce me to probably any of the things that they had experienced. So uh, we didn't talk too much about their past, hardly any at all.
And what do you think happened in their past? What do you talk? What do you mean hectic?
Well, I'm believing that somehow they had a lot to do with slavery. I think they had was really involved with a lot with slavery. I thought my grandmother may be Spanish, but or Indian, but I'm not really sure. But we uh, used her name, her maiden name, which was uh, Nina Bell, and I think she was a Sutton. And if she wasn't a Sutton, she was a Davis. Not really sure, but as we go on, someone out there will probably know a little bit about my family, maybe even a little more than I do myself.
Okay. Let's talk about again another person in your life was your mother. You want to talk about your mom?
Yeah, well, my mom was a very caring and uh, she took care of me, and I know that, and I knew she loved me. I can remember only one Christmas in my life, and that was a Christmas when she was still living, and that just one Christmas before she was getting ready to go out, and she came to me. I was very young at this time, but she had this big red fire truck, and she gave it to me, and it's something I'll always remember, something I cherished for a long time is that big red fire truck, and after a while, I guess as life went on, we had our house burnt down, and I think the fire truck burned up with that. But nevertheless, it was a great memory because it was a great time. I remember my mother for one Christmas, and I think that's the only Christmas that I can remember as a child that I really felt a Christmas. So one out of ever how many? Not too bad.
How many years did you have with your mom?
I only had 9 years with my mom.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you mentioned she was gonna get ready to go out. Where was mom going? Just
Well,
curious.
I think she was. I think she was a outgoing person. She went out. I think it's probably going to a club, nightclub, or not nightclub.
So well,
Back in those days,
a place to dance.
yeah, place to dance and listen to jukebox music.
Okay.
And I went with her a few times to these places, and she would. I would have to wait in the car. Today they would consider that maybe abuse, but I don't.
What kind of car was it?
It was a very old car, probably 1935, 19 something, a very, very old car. But nevertheless, you could lock the doors. I'm not really sure the model of the car, but you could lock the doors. And
This is your mom's car.
no, I'm not. No, it wasn't my mom's car. It was like the, I believe the person who she was with at the time. I believe that might have been their car. But nevertheless, they would leave me in the car.
So he would go too. he was with y'all.
Yeah, he
Sometimes
would go too. Most of the time he was,
he was there.
yeah, he was there.
Okay, so talk about one of the memories you had about these being in the car at the club.
Oh, well, I'll tell you, most of the memories I can remember was bad memories. I believe the first memory I had was on a very rainy, muddy day or evening.
How old were you?
I had to be maybe 7 years old,
And it was
and it was,
nighttime.
yeah, it was nighttime, and it was raining. And in those days, you didn't have streets; you just had
Roads.
roads. And I can remember sitting in the car and waiting for my mom. These people came out of nowhere, and this guy was beating this woman. This woman was had to be 9 months pregnant, 8 or 9 months. She was very humongous pregnant, and this guy beat this woman so bad he just beat her down into the mud, into the street. He stomped her into the ground, and he just treated her really bad. And I just that was one of the bad memories that I had coming up and being in the car at those places that my mother went to. I guess they must have been some of them must have been some pretty rough places. And another thing that I remember vividly was this Mexican guy had been into the club. My mother was in there also. I was in the car, and he was fighting with another guy, and they stumbled outside, and the one Mexican guy cut the other guy's throat, and I saw it, and you could just see the flesh and the wounds wide open. And at this point, I kind of panicked, and I locked the doors, but it was vicious. The guy was still talking, and his throat was wide open. So this was something that I'll never forget. I never forgot. So at a very young age, probably about seven, no more than 8 years old, I was seeing quite a few horrific things happening, and this was one of them, a couple of them.
So I guess I'm gonna kind of take you back a little bit. And I remember you talking about working in the cotton fields with grandma.
Yeah, working in the fields with grandma was um, at first it was pretty uh, hectic. Not hectic, but I would say pretty bad for my grandmother because my grandmother was at this time was dragging me around on her cotton sack because I was too young
How old
to
were you?
pick. I couldn't have been no more than about 5 years old, and even though that was probably old enough to do that to pick cotton, uh, not really at 5 years old. But nevertheless, I probably should have been in school, but at that time, I guess it just wasn't like that. So um, we we worked the cotton fields. My grandmother used to drag me on the back of her cotton sack and pick cotton at the same time. And when she stopped carrying me around on her cotton sack is when I was started growing a little bit, picking up a little weight. And my grandmother told me, she said, I can't do this anymore. I can't carry you anymore. You're too big. You're too heavy. And that's when I obtained my own little cotton sack. And she got somewhat of a little break from dragging me around, but man, that was some experience, to have her remembering her doing this for me is quite emotional because it just goes to show you how hard this little lady worked. She was a very tough little lady, my grandmother.
Um, you want to talk about the cotton fields? How was it?
Well, the cotton fields is like you can't imagine. In those days, the hot meant hot, and you could look out across the cotton fields and you could see heat waves. You could see where the heat waves was, and we had to pick cotton right into those heat waves. And in and out of the heat waves, up and down the fields all day long. Once in a while, we'd stop, like for noontime, to have lunch, to eat our little bologna and crackers or whatever it was. It was something fast because we had to keep going in the fields. We had to keep picking that cotton and whatever we if we were chopping cotton or anything to do with harvesting the a crop for the year was very hard labor, and my grandparents was part of it. That's why I believe that it was part slavery because the money that we were making wasn't very much at all.
Um, so we talked about your mother, and talking about. Is there anything you want to mention? I guess like growing up. I mean, do you have friends?
Well,
Like
yeah,
let's talk about your friends, maybe.
well, yeah.
Or
Coming up from um,
school.
yeah, coming up through school, we it was kind of normal. I can remember a couple of times being in school. I think sometimes when we were working plantations, supposedly, or working the fields, we had to um, we had to make sure that everybody was together. They couldn't leave me in one place and uh, they go to the fields. Everybody had to go. Either we were in or out. So I don't remember a lot about being in into the schools. I do remember the schools that I did go to off and on. It was just a two room shack, and you had one through the fifth grade on one side of the doors, and the doors were sliding doors, and you could slide the doors open, and you were into the next classroom. This classroom had a higher group of kids, which I think was like from the sixth grade to the ninth grade. So this was our school, and there couldn't have been any more than any more than at one time in one day, any day given day. I'd say maybe there was 10, 15 children in school, not very many at all.
What about your teacher?
The teachers, I believe, back in those days was well, Miss Francis. She was like 1 through 5. She taught the classes 1 through 5, and so we went to the other side. We had another teacher over there, and we had a teacher there that was Mr. I think Sterling, I believe it was. This teacher, I don't know where he came from, but this teacher, like he wore the same clothes for days on end, and he had a horrific breath stench uh, in his mouth, and he would come up and stand over you and try to teach you to tell you some of the things that he wanted you to know as a teacher. But I don't think he knew that much himself because, as far back as I can remember, he was using improper language, and it just didn't make any sense. And uh, when this teacher was teaching, I didn't want to be there by him anything because he just didn't seem like a teacher. I couldn't get used to him and his stench, and but he was our teacher.
He wasn't a very good educator.
No, and I didn't feel like he was a very good educator. I don't know where he got his education from, but he was educated enough to, I suppose, be a teacher there in that little town, teaching 10 or 15 students at the most.
Okay. Did you have any? I mean, growing up, there was other kids around. You want to talk about those kids, your neighbors?
Well, yeah, there was other kids around, but I didn't associate with them very much. When I was like 9 years old, my life completely changed. Um,
Talk about that a little bit. What happened?
well, in 1952, my mother was gunned down. She was killed. And the same guy that she had been with before that we had talked about was the guy that did it. And the day, if excuse me if I get a little emotional talking about this, but the day before I mean, the same day he killed her, I can remember he was saying that he was going to kill her. And I didn't pay no attention to that. Where we lived at, right across the street was a store, black owned store. You could go to the house and knock on the door, and the guy would get up from his bed or whatever he was doing, and he would come to the store and get you whatever you needed. And he knew us like that. But nevertheless, when uh, this day on this day, uh, for whatever reason, uh, they sent me more than a mile away to get cigarettes. And I didn't think about it. Back in those days, you just did what you were told to do. And I went to get the cigarettes, which was about a mile one way, and I just could have went across the street. I paid no attention to it. I didn't think nothing of it. and my and so I went and got the cigarettes, and I was on my way back, and I saw this girl that I went to school with, and I could she her name was Laverne Allen, uh, and she was kind of a good friend. The Allens, I remember them, but nevertheless, I was coming back. I had just crossed the tracks into our part of the town, and as you know, the blacks lived on one side of the tracks and the white lives on one side of the tracks. But anyway, I had just crossed the tracks and was maybe about a block and a half, maybe 2 blocks from the house, and walking up the dirt road. And Laverne, she saw me, and she said
Where was she?
she was going downtown for whatever, that's what we had to go to
Was she
do.
walking?
Yeah, she was walking, and I was walking too. So that's how most people got around that little town. Very few people had cars. And when we met, she told me, she said, David, I think your mother's been shot. And I didn't, I couldn't imagine what she was talking about, even though earlier I had remembered my the guy she was with. I don't like to call him my stepfather, but I guess that's how he was acting like a stepfather. And he had shot her. But nevertheless, as she told me this, the car comes barreling around the corner from where we lived. And this car just shot right past me, and another car was behind that car. They stopped and told me to get in. And they picked me up, and we went 11 miles away to Clifton, Texas. That was the nearest hospital. It wasn't a hospital, actually. It was like a kind of like a one-room shack, maybe. Maybe it was a little hospital. I'm not really sure, but it was in Clifton, Texas, which is about 11 miles away. So we did get there. We went to the hospital, and I couldn't imagine what was going on because they said that she had been shot, and I didn't understand it. I didn't understand even why. I couldn't imagine that something had happened like that because I had heard that he said that he was going to kill her. I don't know if they sent me away to keep him from killing me too. I don't know, but I wouldn't have mind just going with her because excuse me, my life was miserable after that because
Can you tell say a little bit more about like what
My
happened
mother,
to
well, my mother was my best friend, and she, I mean, we was best of buddies, and so when we got to the house, we got to the little hospital. They had her in a room, and I guess she couldn't talk to me, so they hurry up and let me in the room to see her. And when I got into the room, she had so many tubes and things in her body, and um, I'll be okay. I'll get over this in just a
take your
second.
time. Take your time. You're okay.
But nevertheless, uh, she kind of patted my head and rubbed me, but she couldn't talk because of all the tubes in her. But I can remember she wanted some water, and they couldn't give her any water. But she wanted, and so they said you can have some ice, and she liked ice, so that was okay with her. And they hurried up and rushed me out. And that was the last time I seen her alive. Mm. I guess they say a man ain't supposed to cry, but at 79 years old, here I am. But it's just like yesterday to talk about this. Uh, it was kind of horrific thing for someone as young as me to have to go through.
You were
But
9 years old.
9 years old. But nevertheless, uh, it was so horrific that all of a sudden, in just one single day, that all of this could take place, and my best buddy was gone and no longer with me. So it was horrific, but it caused me a lot of stress throughout the years and pain and a lot of probably what I'd say was a lot of unnecessary
Trauma.
trauma and thoughts that would always go through my mind. It caused me a lot of anger because I knew he had killed her on purpose, and there was nothing I could do. But I knew what had happened. I don't know how much prison time he did or what,
So he
but
got caught.
oh yeah, he was he. I don't think he ran. I don't think he ran or anything. I don't think he could run.
So that's a record then maybe.
And so,
Did he? I'm just curious. She was shot. How? Where was she shot?
well, she was shot in the stomach, point blank, with a 12 gauge shotgun. So she was pretty messed up. I mean, as far I didn't see the injuries, but as far as I know, what a shotgun can do to you. So I can't imagine her even living long enough to even make it to the hospital, but she did. And after that, there was nobody left. But somehow my grandfather also disappeared during this time period. I think he disappeared somehow a little before my mother was killed.
Before.
Yeah, uh, because my grandfather, he knew about guns, and yeah, I'm sure he loved all of his children. And I don't think if my grandfather would have been living, I don't think he would have. I think he would have probably took things into his own hands and took care of this, rather than have the police or whoever it was that took care of it. He would have took care of it himself because that was his youngest daughter. My mother was the youngest of four. That was his youngest daughter that had just got killed. So I imagine if he would have had something to do with it to say about it, I don't think it would have been so pretty.
So he
But
was gone before your mother was killed.
I believe, I'm not 100% sure, but I believe he was gone before she was.
Do you know why or where he went? What happened?
Okay. Um, Now, this is a couple of things for me to uh, take into consideration uh, about what happened to him because I thought he had um, went away to because he was sick. Someone somehow I picked up on that he had prostate cancer and he died. I'm not really sure, but uh,
Was there another
also,
story?
also, he could have been involved in a type of uh, situation that he had killed a man. Uh, and this is what I picked up from some of my cousins, and I hadn't seen my cousins in over 50 years, and excuse me, and they was telling me about uh, how my grandfather had killed a man, and I can't imagine him ever killing a man because he was such a gentle giant, and he knew all about weapons, and I don't think he had that in his system. I don't think I never seen him take a drink or anything. So he wasn't that type of man. I don't think that he would just kill a man. So I don't really know. I've got to find out more history on that as to what happened and why he would have killed a man.
He
Uh,
just disappeared.
but anyway, I kind of believe that may have been the reason why he disappeared because no one told me about it. He just disappeared. So I'm not really sure. But what happened to him. But all I know is he disappeared, and that was the last I seen him. I never seen or heard from him again.
And so it was just you and grandma.
Me and Nina Bell, me and my grandmother. And my grandmother was such a person that she was gentle, little lady, and she looked like a little old lady. I'll show you a picture of her, some pictures of her later, and you'll see what my grandmother looked like. She was tough. She had to be tough because in that 1 year alone, she lost her husband one way or the other. No matter how you look at it, she lost her husband and a daughter uh, like that. So, and she was still tough. And I'd never seen my grandmother uh, break down and just break down like she should have. I feel like in all the trauma that's happened to her, she should have been breaking down constantly. But I guess she had me to take care of. So she didn't break down. She just remained calm and steady all this time in order to take care of me. But in
What
order
was
to take care of me, we had no money.
so what y'all do?
Well,
She
we
worked. You guys worked.
no, no. After my grandfather,
There was another tragedy though during that time too with the
uh,
house.
yeah, and during that time too, with the house burnt down, uh, and the owner's house that we had and we knew burnt completely to the ground. Um, I was in school that day, and someone came out and come back into school and said your house is on fire. We School was only about a couple of blocks away from where we lived at. It was on a hill, just a big hill. Highest hills is where our school was. And so I came down, and my grandmother and her sister was standing outside the house. And I think what had happened is they had kerosene had got out of control some kind of way, and just burned the house down. Didn't have fires. They had one fire truck in the town, and the fire truck had to carry its own water, I think. So our house burned down completely to the ground. So we had to start.
You guys were homeless.
We were homeless. We had no place to go. We had no one to turn to. But my grandmother had an old sister, older sister, I guess, and her name was Lula, and that was my grandmother's sister. And she took us in, and we stayed there for a while, and then we started moving around to different parts of Texas. I think a place called Centersville, and we had relatives there, and we went there and stayed for a while, and then we ended up back in Valley Mills. Somehow, along the way, we got another old house built in the place of the one that we had lost, but it wasn't near about. It was only like one a living room, small living room, big enough for a bed and a chair on the stove. And then we had one little bedroom on the side and one little kitchen. And that's all we had. And we didn't have any, never had a toilet or anything like that. We always had to use the outhouse. So it was a roof over our head, but
But you guys are back in Valley Mills.
back in Dottie Mills, yeah, this little one room shack. And if it seem, I'm trying to adjust the light here. If it looks like I'm looking over, I'm trying to get used to looking at this point on the camera. So if it seems like I'm,
So we, you
mm,
know, basically we come to a point where it's just you and grandma now. You've been through a lot. Um, and there's something that you've told me, growing up as a kid about how you kind of were plotting or waiting to avenge your mother.
yeah,
You want to touch on that, and then maybe we'll
yeah,
take a break.
yeah, I do. Growing up, I think I was maybe somewhat of a pretty smart kid, uh,
And alone.
and alone, and I, I never had anyone to vent to, let them know how I felt. So I spent most of my time by myself and thinking of ways at this early of an age, 9 years old. I was thinking of ways to uh, get even uh, with my stepfather, the man that killed my mother.
You know his name?
His name was Frank Robinson. The Robinsons came from a little place called McGregor, Texas, and they were okay people, and they accepted me and they loved me because even after this had happened, and they know that he did it and he was part of that family, they still kind of looked after me, took me in, at times and talked to me and just kind of let me know that that they were family, but they really weren't. They were his family, and I don't know exactly how that went, but it was a very short-lived interaction with those people, and the rest of my time was spent on trying to figure out how I could possibly uh, retaliate uh, against him for what he did to my mother, because I alone knew that he did it on purpose because he said he was going to do it, and I could never shake that. I could never get that out of my mind. So I spent the time. I didn't have access to weapons, any type of a weapon, gun. So I've tried to figure out how I could get him and get even with him. And I used to have access to bullets, 22 bullets and shotgun bullets, but there were no guns to go with them. So I kind of experimented by myself. One day I went into this old junkyard like, and I found this. It was like a door hinge, and the bullet fit perfectly in there without going through. And I said, well, maybe this is a way that I can make myself a gun and go in and get him. Well, during this period, um, I had to figure out a way to fire the bullet, and I didn't uh, know that much. How I knew that much at 9 years old to know that gun had to have a firing pin to fire the bullet, but somehow I knew. And at that early age, I took a nail and a hammer and put it into uh, fit into the casing of the uh, the thing that was holding the bullet in place, and I put nail on the end of the bullet, hit it with the hammer, and it fired. And for many years, I was trying to figure out how I could do this and go find out where he was and do him in. For many years, I carried all of that weight around with just thinking about how I could get rid of him. But that was a lot of weight to carry around as a child uh, with that something like that on my mind. So at a very young age, my thoughts were they weren't too good.
about trouble.
Yeah, trouble.
So, is there anything else you wanted to say at this moment?
Well, at this moment, I want to take a break. I'd like to take a break, and we can come back to this. And I got a lot to say.
Continue the childhood.
I got a lot to say about the childhood.
Mhm.
A lot to say about it. It's just the beginning. Uh, and these are some things that was close to me that was happening. I want to take you on some trips where other people, I believe, had tried to kill me, but I survived it. So uh, after this segment here, I'd like to just get back into it, but I'd like to take a break right now. And I'd like to say to everybody out there who's been listening, thank you for listening, and I appreciate it because I've needed to get this out for a long time. I've never, out of all of these years, 70, some 70 years, and I've never talked to anybody about it. So thanks for listening to me, and I've got a lot more to say. Thank you. We'll be back.